All right. Good morning again. Today is July 15th. This is the Kubernetes Data Protection Working Group meeting. Today we're going to go through actually three topics. One is Shin and I had another round of discussion between Signal leadership as well as team on the container notifier design doc. We collect some feedback, and then I think 2 weeks back, Tom from Caston has get another person. It is a that gives us some updates from Caston's perspective, how they are looking at the notifier and whether they prefer CRD or notifier approach. And today, Shin and I want to give you guys more updates on that. I think that person was Kirushina, right? No, it's not. Sorry, I forgot the other person's name.
Actually,
Huh?
Tom was the one who gave the presentation.
Who gave the talk?
I think
Okay, I was not.
out that time. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing is that we have been discussing the data protection workflow in the beginning of this working group, but unfortunately, we haven't made too much progress so far. Today we're going to revisit some of the thoughts. Shin has put up a doc about that. We'll go through that doc. And the last minor thing is that there's Kubernetes annually report thing newly added. There's a pull request that lists in the agenda. So far, there's no action item for the working group per se, but if you guys are interested, feel free to take a look. All right, Shin, can you present your doc, please?
Yeah, sure.
I'll share to you.
Okay, let me share this. Okay. Okay, so this is the doc. So we have already talked about this before. So the latest proposal is to break this content notify into two parts. One part will have the action defined there. In action, we could have a command to run in the container or some signal, and then we have a probe. So kubelet can, after sending the action, it can use the probe to check whether the action has get the desired results. And so the discussion we have, we got some comments from mainly the Signal. They're still very concerned about adding all of this complicated logic into Signal, into kubelet. So they so I added some notes here. Mainly, there are a couple of action items. The first thing is they want us to summarize the CRD approach, so that I did. So we already talked about the execution hook CRD approach several times, so I'm not going to repeat that. And the second one is because we did put down the workflow for a quiesce and unquiesce, but they want us to also do the same thing for some other workflows. So I've added two short one. For one is, this is like a signal. If you want to send a SigHub signal to a pod, what do you do? And then the other one is send a signal to change log level. So yeah, so this one, so just to simplify things, just assume that we're only sending this to one container in the pod. And in this case, so the signal is defined in the container notify action inside the container. And then we have an external controller, which will create a notification object to request this signal. Kubelet watches the notification object and get notified, and then it will send this signal to the container. So this is like do a Docker kill with a SigHub signal. And then the probe, in this case, will just be checking to see the container is, whether the container is still running. If the probe detects that the container is no longer running, that means the signal is sent and it's successful. So then Kubernetes sets the succeeded field in container notification status to true. If the container is still running, then Kubernetes will just retry and probe the container again until it times out. Yeah, so this is a very simple one. Any questions on this? This is, I know this is not really the use case that this working group is interested in, but then since now we are trying to have designed this API as a more general API, so we need to at least describe how this would work as well.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, and similarly, there is so for change log velocity, it's very similar to that one. Basically, user want to change log level, then the external controller will create a notification object, request this change log level, and then Kubernetes watches it and gets this request. It sends the change log level signal that is defined in the container notify action to the container. And Kubernetes also send a probe to check the existing log level in container to see if it's changed. Then if it's changed, then it sets the status succeeded to true. So very similar things. One thing that they were actually talking about something like an internal signal, which, so I'm really not that familiar with Kubernetes, so I'm actually not sure how to do this internal signal. So Xiangqi, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, the internal one. They also asked
You mean
about,
Dawn's?
yeah, she was talking about some internal signal, but I'm actually not quite sure how to do. So I know they have so they also asked about using this for a node shutdown, like Avid node, right? So that, so I thought about that, but that is different. So for a node shutdown, the command that should actually be run on the node itself, not really inside the container. So
No, it is the same. Yeah, what the use case is that Kubernetes is trying to solve is when a node is marked as taint, or it is getting shut down, it would like Kubernetes, some applications would like Kubernetes to send gracefully exiting signals to the container instead of just evict them or before evict them. That's one. The other one is that Kubernetes realized there's not enough resource on a specific node, and they try to do some eviction on some existing containers or pods. They would like a mechanism to let the containers or pods know that I am running out of resources, I'm gonna evict you. So that this is especially interesting and important for some stateful workload, so that they can basically have time and their chance to flush whatever the stats from the RAM into the disk.
But is that comment? So see, that's a part that I was actually checking this this doc. Okay, I actually have a doc here. I was just trying to check like what they're sending. I think it's not really like sending like a SigHub in container. I believe it's something else, because I was checking. Well, I could be wrong, but I'm not really familiar with this. Maybe there's something that we need to ask them about. So I'm looking at this doc. So this is a Signal has this. They have this working group. So I attended once. They have this doc talk about, you know, what is a node shutdown, like how to detect it. They talked about what are the commands that will be considered a shutdown. So they have something like, you know, you'd be running something like this. So to me, those type of things will actually just be running directly on the node itself,
No.
not going through a container. That's my understanding, but that's my understanding.
This is probably not very related, but in the third point over there, system D actually says, yeah, that might be related.
Which
I think it's more related to,
the third
say
one?
it again, please.
Which
No,
one?
no, I mean the signals.
Oh.
The signals, the nodes, when a node shuts down, it's more related to Kubernetes being able to, the Kubernetes being able to notify stateful workloads hosted on that node.
Oh, you're saying that you're saying they're not really talking about shutting down the node, but talking about inform the pods, something's wrong.
Exactly.
So it's
Yeah.
so basically you're saying this use case that we have, this workflow, what we have here, maybe it is what they want, like sending the
It is exactly what they want, but whether this is the way they want to do it, I don't know.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We can maybe ask them then. Yeah. Well, I was not quite sure. Yeah, because they asked about the no shutdown thing. I know they have been they have a dedicated group working on this one. So this is a very complicated thing. I really hoping that we don't have to use our API to solve this case. It's a complicated problem that will be very wide scope. So I
have two questions. Like, why SigHub instead of SigTerm?
SigTerm is fine too. I was just this is just one example that I found.
Okay, because I was going to say, like, I would.
One example. I'm not saying that this is because I was searching and I see this one happening.
But whenever you kill a pod, the process is going to receive a SigTerm. Like, that's just how things are killed. And
yeah, but this is but if I search for like a Docker kill command, I see this example. So
well, that's if you want to use a different command or a signal other than SigTerm, right? If you just do Docker kill, it's going to get a SigTerm, presumably.
Yeah, so I think it also depends on how we are passing this in, right? So I think if it's SigTerm, so if we so this, I think this is something that I actually got some comments from Andrew Kim, who I was asking, because I think he's probably also working with nodes. So he was saying he was actually having a suggestion to other than this action, which is sending a command. He was saying maybe signal should be separate field, like here, right? So this is more like running a command, but he was saying, oh, maybe the signal should be separate one. So we just this way we can just say SigTerm or something that those are all recognizable signals. Like
but I mean, but SigTerm is the default. Like if you don't specify a signal and you kill something, you get SigTerm. And for the vast majority of things, that should be okay. Typically, when you want to send something other than SigTerm, it's because you don't actually want to kill it. You just want to interrupt it or wake it up or tell it something's happening, but you want it to live on. Or there's the kill-9, sig kill, which just murders the process without any notification at all, which is, I don't think, something that anybody really wants except in emergencies.
I think probably I use SigHub also because of this issue. I believe Tim mentioned this one. Yeah, fine, we can change that one. So like I think he talked about Q cuddle signal .q or something. Yeah, so and he talked about I think that's probably why I use this. He talked about SigHub. So I think I'm fine changing to other examples.
But I'm with you that this I don't see the relationship with storage or data protection.
No, it's not storage. This is not storage at all. This is only because I think
you want to give a little bit background why how we evolved this step.
Oh,
again.
Yeah. So right. So so actually Ben, actually you should be familiar with this. You have been participating in maybe all the meetings, right? So in the beginning, we have the execution hook CRD approach, right? And also Tom also went through that last time, right? So that's very specific only for the quiescing use case that we are interested in. But then we got pushback from the API reviewer saying that's not secure. So then we are going through this approach, which is to define this inside the container. But then since we're doing inside the container, so team has this, request long time ago. He always want to do this. So since we are going to define this as a container inline spec anyway, so why don't we make this more general, right? So this way, this is not only for QoS anymore. This is for many other use cases as well. So I think that's how now we are getting into this case.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you're saying that delivery of signals to containers might be a replacement for the entire concept of execution hooks?
So basically, this will be this will be this. So like this use case. Actually, let me actually go back to my this other. That's not my original. Yeah, you can. Yeah, go ahead, Shantian.
Just summarize it. Yeah, to add on top of what Shin was describing, Ben, and the evolution of this whole proposal, as Shin stated, initially with the CRD approach. Then there are two main reasons why this one, which is sitting in Kubernetes and introduced quite some actually core type API types. The first reason is exactly as Shin was saying. Using the CRD approach, basically we need to grant the controller a super user or higher priority so that it can run all those kube exits against any part, a random part in the system. That brings a big security concern. That's one. The other one is that traditionally there's no good way to express imperative signals in Kubernetes. And then team got this request, and I totally think that request is legit, especially for a lot of existing applications, debuggers or programmers, engineers using signals to communicate with the application, either to adjust log levels or dump something. It's very typical and very normal in today's commercial software. So the proposal was, since we haven't even modeled the imperative signals in Kubernetes, why don't we just utilize this opportunity to add more use cases and take the hard route? And the hard route now becomes define limited number of supported signals in Kubernetes. Also offer application owners the ability to basically define the corresponding commands they want to run as execution hook via the notification mechanism. In this step, the kubelet will be the executor of those commands, since Kubernetes already has this, super sudo or whatever privilege. It needs to run any commands on a node. So
the execution hooks are an alternative to signals that kubelet also knows how to run.
Yeah, it's a type of signals that the kubelet knows how to run.
But it's not literally like a Unix signal that gets delivered to a process. It's an invocation of another process. Okay, because I was going to say signals are great for lots of things, but they're unidirectional, right? You can send a signal, but you get zero information back. The original conception of an execution hook was that it's bidirectional, right? You say this is what I want, and then it says I succeeded or I failed, and you get a response back.
That's a great point. As a matter of fact, there's the heated discussion over that, and thus the compromised prop. You see the prop definition over there? That's exactly to get what you were describing, Ben.
Yeah, so that's why.
So after you execute a command against a container, you also want to supply a prop which let the kubelet periodically query the container for the status, and the status will be fit into a vector, right? I think a condition vector that tells you exactly which status it has been.
And the probes are updated on a timer or asynchronously, or?
Good question. We don't know yet. How to model the probe implementation, those are relatively implementation details. But yeah, we didn't even get a chance to get this far.
Yeah, so if you can see this probe definition, right? So this one actually has a lot of the timeouts, like how often you want to run the probe, even the success threshold. So they have a lot of things that you can define to make sure your probe is precise.
Because I think what we have to be thinking about is, like, if I'm trying to build like a backup app that takes a backup of some workload every 15 minutes, like then every 15 minutes it's going to deliver a signal that says, do your quiescing thing, because I'm going to take a snapshot soon. And you're going to have to wait for some signal to come back that says, yep, I am ready for you to take that snapshot. Then you're going to have to take the snapshot. That's going to take however long that takes.
Yeah,
then you're going to have to send another signal that says, okay, now you can go back to doing what you're doing. And if that whole thing takes more than like a few seconds and you're doing it every 15 minutes, people are going to notice, right? Because your app is always going to be going up and down and up and down. So you really want to minimize the latency in any one of these steps.
Great point, Ben. But I treat this problem in two aspects. The probe itself is not gonna be sufficient to cover the use cases we were talking about, especially when we talk about quiz hooks. As you said, we don't want a quiz for 50 minutes, right? The first
no,
time
I'm saying, like,
when
you might quiesce for 10 seconds out of every 15 minutes to take your snapshot, but if it takes like 10 seconds just to find out that you've successfully quiesced, you could easily double the amount of time that you are quiesced, because you don't even start taking the snapshot until after you get the answer back that, yes, I'm quiesced.
Hey, Ben, I think not really required. I personally think that probe is more appropriate for the signal type of thing, but for quiesce, that's not really a signal. We're running a command, right? So I'm thinking
any type of thing where the thing that wants to take the snapshot and wants the pod to be in a certain state when it takes a snapshot, there needs to be a whole round trip that says, go make your state change and then tell me that it has happened so that I can move on to my next step. And then when I'm done, I will tell you that you can move on to your next step. And there's this, back
so I think this is actually great feedback that I think we can, add.
No, shouldn't we discuss this in the meeting? Right, we discussed this in the meeting to address exactly the problem, right? That the problem is that you don't want to wait too long for quiesce, especially and this feedback loop. There are actually two things, right, we can do. One is to define the contract. So when kubelet execute the action item against a specific container, there gonna be some stand out or stand errors, something like that, right? And that one we want to carefully define for queries and unqueries, so that application owners who actually implement those execution hooks, those hooks, need to return a fixed format of the standard out or standard error, so that kubelet can translate that information into the corresponding response, as not the response, the states of the notify action item. And that happens in the first round. When after it runs the command, it gets the output and it fills in the output into the state as the status of the container notify action. And the probe is just what Xin was trying to say. What Xin was saying is more for situations like if you send a signal to a container, you don't get anything back. So I think we can still use probes to avoid not receiving anything or timeout or something like that. Could cause an exit against the container. It times out, but the main purpose of probe is not really for the queries and unqueries hooks case.
Okay, yeah, as long as there's a way to do like bidirectional communication without polling, like where I can synchronously discover as soon as something is done, modulo whatever wire speed or processing delays there are. You never want to have a situation where you're like, have to come back and ask later how it's doing.
I totally agree with you. On the other hand, one of the big pushback actually from Kubernetes is that you definitely don't want Kubernetes to hang there and wait for the command to finish, and then go back and update that.
Right,
So
but I mean, some object that you could establish like an API watch on, so that as soon as the status update goes to the API server, it will tell anyone who's watching it that there's been a state change, so they can move forward. Like that would be an acceptable amount of delay to do it through an API watch. Just something so that you can trigger on completion of the execution hook.
Just to interject
Sure.
a bit on acceptable delay. Okay, we currently get complaints about VMs being stunned for milliseconds. So don't think that you're going to be able to make this path high performance enough to meet every requirement.
Sure. I think what Ben was trying to say is that we should minimize the latency introduced by the execution hook. If the application itself needs certain time to quiesce or unquiesce the application, then I don't think we can effectively solve the problem here.
No,
Well,
it's just assuming that the quiesce itself only takes milliseconds, the waiting for it to find out that it happened should also not take more than additional milliseconds. You wouldn't want to have a situation where you're on like a 10-second polling loop, and you find out 10 seconds later that it got done.
Yep. But anyway, I don't know if for the controller, for the CRD approach, we might have the same thing, right? You cannot get away from it. Even if you take the CRD one, you still need some kind of mechanism to create that feedback loop, as you were mentioning.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
And with regard to like the format of the return status, I don't know if strings and standard out are the best way. Like I like numerical return codes more than strings, but I agree there has to be a standard, and it has to be rich enough that you get more than like a Boolean. You need to be able to give a little bit more detail.
Right, and that deserves another whole discussion with the Kubernetes team, Signal's team.
I'm not sure how flexible that part is. So like for example, I just checked the probe thing, liveless probe thing. They basically just return either 0 or some number, positive number. I think 0 meaning success, or anything else is not success, something like that. Yeah, so I don't know if we can have a lot of choice on what to return there, but we can take a look. So I want to just refresh ours, because I was have been talking about those workflows for signals, but we actually had this workflow before, which is really for our quiesce use case, right? So you let's say, suppose you have several commands you need to run. Before taking a snapshot of MySQL, you need to do log table, flush disk, and then do fs freeze. So, and then take snapshot, fs unfreeze, unlock tables. So we had this one before, but Signal, they want us to provide workflows for other use cases. They're saying, oh, you're only providing one use case. So that's why we added those short workflows that we just talked about earlier, so that we covered everything, right? So otherwise, if it's just for our working group, of course, this is what we are interested in. We'll only be showing this, but they want to make sure this API designed also works for other use cases that we are trying to cover here. So that's why we only talked about this here. Let's see, anything else for this? Shanti, I remember they are saying there were some limitations with the probe, like how many probe you can do. Do you remember? I didn't write it down. I forgot what is they have some exact number. Like how many probes you can do? Do you remember that part?
It's not about how many probes. It's about kubeless performance concern. There are two concerns basically. One is that how frequently should kubelet be running those probes and when it should be triggered. One idea is, of course, you kubelet, regardless whether there's any action or not, is gonna continuously call the probe code regardless and update the status. Now, since the node object or the container object already has very rich information already, so they want to limit the number of status that sits in every single probe code. So I think team put some fake number over there as a first sort, some 8 per 8 probes max or something like that. That needs to be reevaluated and being reviewed by Signal team if this is if the proposal gets through.
Okay.
And that's just
I think
just
it's
to limit the amount of YAML associated with a pod when you do a get. So it's
This
not
is
the
how many
smallest YAML
probes to
document.
run at the same time, or how many probes for what? How many per what?
How many probes you can have?
To run at the
That's
same
one.
time?
Yes, and the other one is how many, I think, how many status you can have for each one as well.
How many status? What do you want to say?
Yeah, check team's comment. Yeah, because you remember his original idea was slightly different than what you have here. What you have over here is have the probe inside, right?
Right. He
And
was
then
saying, he
the
was
orthogonal one.
saying, don't correlate them. Well, mine is more like 1, 1. I thought this is more clear, but he was saying probe is just completely separate. But then.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And if you do the math, it's basically a product.
Yeah, but he said he's okay with either way. But if separate, then yeah, I guess it's okay. But I don't know. I thought this is more clear for me to put them together, to think about them together. Otherwise, it can. I think they can still have the same name to correlate. I guess. Yeah. I just feel this is more clear.
Yeah, just to communicate back to the group. One of the biggest concerns that Signal has is this is such powerful thing. And they literally introduce an imperative where you can execute any command against any container via kubelet at any given time, as long as it's defining your pod definition. Yes, the pod owners still owns definition of the command. It still owns how to write up all those commands. However, anyone who has accessibility to create those notifiers will be able to trigger those commands. So they are afraid, they're concerned of those notifiers get abused and even get attacked. So honestly, I don't have a good answer for that. I think kubelet already have this problem because this kube exit itself, it is doing this thing exactly, and it's less controlled. I personally think this is in general problem that not introduced by this but already exists. So that's basically my argument back to them. But again,
I think they were also asking, like, they don't even know how many probes can be supported. Like, how do we know if they don't even know? I'm not sure how to even find out about this. So I think,
I think the key is that we need to have some limitation to start with, and some reasonable limitation to start with, and then we can evaluate that.
Yeah. So if you even just look at the existing probes, those are very powerful. It's very tricky on how to set it correctly, like the liveness probe, because it's going to restart container if detected not live anymore, right? So that's could be dangerous if it's not done right. Could cause hand sometimes. So that's already very tricky for those existing ones. Like they have, I see that.
Ben, you got a question? Ben, I think Ben got a question.
Ben, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I can see the argument why this is a little bit more scary than kube control exec, because I mean, you never really need to use the exec command to do most things. And a Kubernetes administrator could take the stance that, look, no one's going to exec anything in my cloud, and you can still all get your work done, and that's fine. I think the problem with the notifiers is what's going to happen is once they get introduced and once we start using them, like, you're not going to be able to realistically turn them off and still expect things to work well, because things are going to start to depend on them. So they're going to become the kind of thing where everyone's going to have them enabled, and the RBAC is going to have to be enabled. And so if it's as bad as exec in terms of how dangerous it is, then you're not going to be able to fence it off just with some RBAC rules. And so
that's not true, actually. If you restrict who are the personnel can create notify action objects, then it achieves the same level of security. If that
I guess what I'm saying is, I can imagine a future where everyone has, infrastructure installed in their cloud that uses the notifiers, and so they have to be enabled for at least those applications. Whereas the difference with exec is I think you can reasonably say, like, you just don't need to use exec, period. I'm returning it off, and nothing legitimate depends on it. So
how can you turn it off?
No.
And enable that. I don't think you can turn out same thing.
I think there's a distinction over here. The application owners, they don't necessarily need to have access to container notify action creation. They need to define those things in the pod. That's all. But they are not necessarily the executor. The executor are the controllers, application controllers, who take care of the snapshot in the backup, right? And you need RBAC rules for those. You don't necessarily need RBAC rules for application owners. Of course, maybe in a testing phase, you probably need that, but in real world, you might not necessarily need them at all.
But you could make the same argument about exec, and people could say, well, that's ridiculous.
That's exactly my point.
Global exec access to everything. So I don't know.
That's exactly my point.
But I think I can see the argument why, like, we need to be careful about it. And just because exec exists doesn't mean we can add more scary bad things.
Oh yeah, that's the point as well. So anyway, I kind of feel this cap is somewhere in the mud. We are facing serious pushbacks from Signal. More evaluations need to be done on this, I guess.
Yeah.
Is there a fallback
All right,
plan?
Shane, let's wrap up on this. Sorry.
Is there any question?
Is there an alternative though? Because, like, this feels like a step forward from the old design, but like if people say no to something like this, like at some point it just becomes impossible to do what you would like to do, right?
Yeah, so we need to, so right now they didn't say 100% no, they are still saying, hey, can you show us this, can you show us that? So that's what we're trying to do. We show them this and then see what is their next requirement, right? If they just completely say, oh no, 100% no, then we're going to go talk to Tim, who is the API reviewer, saying, okay, then what should we do? Then maybe we need to narrow down the scope or something, right? So I think so right now we're still trying to.
But at some point you can't make the scope any smaller. Like we need. Yeah. To meet our use case, there's some things that are just non-negotiable, and like you're kind of getting close to that with this design already. I feel.
So to make the scope smaller, what I'm saying is, I think even Tim mentioned that, or maybe we need to do something more specific just for this. I think he would like to do this for a more general purpose, but maybe then we just do this for QoS. I think he did mention something like that. We haven't got to that point yet, right? So that's a smaller scope.
Xin and I are actually on the same page as what Ben, you were describing. Both of us actually wants to move forward with certain decision as soon as possible, and that this has been a couple months already back and forth for the design. There are concerns around the container notifier approach. We took this hard road. We know it is hard and we know it is going to be challenging, to introduce new code types as well as introduce complexities into kubelet in the beginning. So we anticipate that, but we also see the value of it. To be fair, right? Team is behind all this to push the effort forward, and he's been very helpful by helping us convincing Signal people. But he also acknowledged that this is something that worth very thorough thinking and design around how we do that. He is not against the idea of taking the CRD approach as well. But one thing I think Xin and I will need to do is to follow up with the security team to figure out what exactly are the concerns around grant controllers super privilege so that it can run exit against any containers.
You mean high Kubernetes RBAC privilege?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so
and how do
that's
we?
a good point, actually. I think even if we go with this approach, I think we also should get the Seekoff involved, because we don't even know, are they 100% on board with this one, right?
Well,
so I think we probably should also start talking to them as well.
I was just going to mention that there's the Kubernetes RBAC type access control questions that are important, but we can't lose sight of the other access control questions, which are the level of privilege on the node that required to do the things that we want. Like you mentioned with MySQL, you want to do an FS freeze. Like you can't do an FS freeze from inside a container unless the container is running with
Privilege.
capsysadmin.
Yeah.
And like, and obviously it's not acceptable to run all your databases with capsysadmin. So like, that's a node level permission question that has to be sorted out, where maybe the FS freeze has to be outsourced back to kubelet somehow, because it can do those kinds of things on behalf of the container.
That's right. That's right. Or take on that is that there's still unknowns light ahead of us for this proposal. There are unknowns for the CRD approach as well. So in order to speed the process a little bit more, two things will definitely help that I can tell. One thing is that we have more concrete use cases of using those container notifiers, especially the cases where we need to somehow signal a certain part of a container to support the point that a container notify is actually a thing that everybody wants in Kubernetes world. That will definitely help. If anyone has those use cases, please let us know.
I mean, use cases other than QuiES on QuiES.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, even within QuiES, there's going to be 100 different ways to do it depending on your application.
Yeah, that's
saying
true.
they're not interested in that.
Yeah, they're not.
Okay.
They're interested in more generic signal usages or similar use cases that can utilize this notifier, and that's one. And the other one is this: both proposal faces a serious challenge in terms of security concerns. The CRD approach was mostly to grant the controller RBAC rules can exit very high privilege commands, and the kubelet one faces the problems like abuse and defeat attack, etc., etc. And those are the unknown questions we need to answer before we can move this thing forward.
Yep.
So from the DP point of view,
okay.
I mean, is this thing just kind of moving kind of way beyond our actual needs here?
Yes, Dave, I have to agree with you that this is way beyond our scope. But again, we took the hard route not because it is only gonna solve our problem, but we took it because it is gonna just solve a broader problem, which is not DP related, but a lot of people actually likes it in Kubernetes.
Good luck, guys. Thanks for taking this on.
All right. So you want to move on to the next one? We have 10 minutes left for this session, and we'll won't see any open questions.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, we can just talk about next one quickly, and then we can maybe go over that more next time. So So the next one is the data. Okay, so we have this data protection workflows. So we did start a discussion on this early on, but we didn't continue. So we just put together. This is a more simplified version of how to what are the workflows in data protection. So we have a table of content. Just getting started. So I'd like to get people in this working group who are interested in contributing to work on this doc together. So this is a more simpler than what we had discussed earlier. So this one would be I'll just go through the table of contents, right? So why we need to have data protection in Kubernetes, what is currently there, and what is missing. And we want to figure out how to identify resources and the backup and restore workflow. And then the last one is application snapshot backup and restore workflow. So we can come back and go over this in the next meeting. And
on top of what Jim was describing, I think initially we had this initiative to kind of come up with a white paper of this whole working group and what are the items, what are the workflows we want to achieve, right? And from there, we identify different components like in different systems, either from Seek apps or Seek storage or now Seek Node to support those workflows. I think it actually was on me. And in the middle, we dropped the ball a little bit. And now I discussed with Shin. I feel this is something we need to figure out as soon as possible. And then that's this draft. I think the whole purpose at this point, the doc is in no way complete. We are expecting anyone in the working group who are interested to give us input in this doc by either editing the contents or comment on this or giving feedback on the items, etc., so that we can have a clear kind of roadmap concept of this working group. We can then move on different components.
Yeah, so if you're
sorry, Chen, go ahead.
So if you're interested, just let us know, or you can also add comments on stock as well.
So just to, because there were multiple ways to help. So can we go through that? Because comments is easy, but what would be the preferred way to help? Like what, because 27 people whacking at a document is fun, but not productive.
Right.
What would you prefer that we do?
So why don't you just, I like to see who are interested in first, and maybe you can see how we can maybe divide the doc into several pieces, and then maybe a few people can work on one section, the other people can work on the other section. We can do that way. Or you can also, you can also add comments here as well. So why don't you just, whoever are interested in contributing, please email me and Shang Chen. Then we can figure out how to move forward. Yeah, that's the thing. If there are too many people modifying the same activity, so probably we'll need to have like.
So Shing, what's the end result with this one?
So so you remember that this is actually in our charter. We actually have one that is to have the, but I think initially we had some meetings. I think in Dave also put together like an outline, but that has a very wide scope. So this is a much smaller scope. I think it's more achievable. So I would like to see what we can come up with, and then we can actually eventually upload this one to the community repo under our working group. So if it's once it's complete, of course it's not complete, we cannot do that. So I think that's what we would like to do eventually, to publish that.
It seems to me that the what is currently available and what is missing is probably what we should flesh out, because that'll give us our roadmap.
Yeah, I think we should start with the from the beginning, right? And then of course the the last one is more complicated. We haven't really spent much time talking about that yet. So probably we need to put those section on hold first. Maybe we need to start with the easier or more well-known sections first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Stephen has a very good question with regarding how we can collaborate on this effort. Xin and I will take an action item on that. At this stage, I think, yeah, if you are interested, please shoot us an email. Then we can, have a smaller discussion around how do we work together on this doc exactly.
I heard Carl wanted to really write on the doc. That was the rumor.
All right. We're 5 minutes away from today's session. Jin, do you? That's all right. Yeah, but
yeah, go ahead.
In your report.
Yeah, we have this. Just want to show. I mean, we're not really. Just quickly. This is just we got pinned on this one. So,
yeah.
I think the steering committee just started this one. They want to have more communication with the working groups to see how we are doing. So they just pinned us. We just need to answer a few questions here. I think should be straightforward. I don't see shouldn't be too difficult, right? So basically, there was a section. I think it's for the I think probably this section like the mission, the roadmap, and what you have done, and things like that. So yeah, so Chantian and I is going to answer this question, and maybe you guys can comment on that, and then we can send it out. So this shouldn't be too difficult, but it's just they just added this formal thing recently. Actually, we just got pinned yesterday on this one. So
yeah.
So
okay, then I'll open the.
Yeah.
I'll open the session to any questions, open issues to the group. Questions? Going once? Going twice? All right, thanks everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.